How's it going, Giants fans? Welcome back to Fireside Giants. If you notice, Anthony is not with us today, but we got Ryan from Fireside Yankees. If you are a Yankee fan, make sure to go check out the Fireside Yankees podcast, content every day, just like the Giants. And things are looking a little bit more interesting at the very moment for the Yankees, making some big acquisitions like Juan Soto. And for the Giants, we're just wondering kind of what happens after Week 18. And we're going to talk about the Week 18 kind of draft implications. I know a lot of people are kind of tired talking about the draft. Let me get it. There's just not really much to talk about the Giants right now. They're not in the playoffs. Dante Banks is injured. Might not see him again this season. Tyree Phillips just had a torn quad. He's out for the rest of the year. So, it's like, what are we really fighting for except for, some pride? And the Giants team certainly showed up against the Rams and almost snuck out a win there. But the Eagles are in an interesting spot. So we'll talk about kind of they might rest their starters, how that could impact us, what a win for New England would look like against the Jets. And, Jets obviously being a very winnable team, a beatable team rather. We'll talk about kind of how this whole draft thing could shake out depending on wins, losses, how the Giants kind of shape out in Week 18, and what to expect, because there's a lot of moving parts here. A lot of things can happen. But Ryan, before we dive into it, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing great. As you kind of mentioned with the Giants right now, they're in a weird spot, right? Like, obviously you're not in contention for a playoff spot. You're kind of staring and saying, hey, you kind of have to hope that things shake your way with other matchups. You're rooting for the Patriots to, get a win. You're rooting for, which is a weird thing to say. You're rooting for the Seahawks to kind of miss the playoffs, and they've got to lose to the Cardinals. Now, they do have Kyler Murray, that being Arizona, which definitely makes them look a lot better than they did when they didn't have Kyler Murray, when they were throwing out Josh Dobbs. And even then, I'm not saying the Giants are world beaters or anything, but, they did drop 30-something points on the defense in week 2 with, again, Josh Dobbs. So, the Eagles defense has looked really suspect as of late. So, not the Eagles, excuse me, the Seahawks defense has looked a little suspect as of late. So, you're a little bit concerned about how, they're going to play. If you're a Seahawks fan, you also are playing for your life, which doesn't help the Giants here because it's not like they're playing a Seahawks team that's clinched a playoff spot. The Rams kind of, by not beating the Rams, they kind of put the Seahawks in a position where they've got to play for their lives. But this isn't a great team either. It's like Geno Smith is like an elite quarterback. He's a good quarterback, but you could argue Kyler Murray is better. Kind of going back to the Patriots-Jets game here, we were talking about this before we even recorded. Bailey Zappi is just not a good quarterback. You gotta, as the Jets defense is, even, with their quarterback issues, even with all the controversy that's gone on with their quarterback room, their defense is good, right? Like, their defense is consistently played at a really high level. You imagine that they're going to be able to create turnovers, that they're going to be able to give themselves excellent field position. You could argue the same for the Patriots, but I do feel better about the Jets defense, so that's something to certainly look out for. And then looking at the Commanders, they're going to be playing a Dallas team that I imagine is going to be playing their tail off. They want to win the division. There's every incentive to win the division. There's a lot on the line for them. The Lions, obviously, however they play will affect, the seeding as well. So I imagine the Cowboys are going to play really well. But, we saw last year that the Commanders kind of snuck up on Dallas and, they were able to ambush them in Week 18. You don't really need all 3 teams to win in order for you to end up in a pretty good draft position. You just need 2 of them to. If you end up with a top 3 draft pick, you secure that you're going to get a chance at either Drake May, Caleb Williams, or Jaden Daniels. Now, is the number 3 spot where you're going to be picking Jaden Daniels? I don't know, but Alex, they just need a shot at a quarterback. That's really all I feel. Because even if you don't want to draft a quarterback, you can at least trade down. This is a market that you're going to get a lot back for any position where you can get a quarterback. You've got to look at it from a perspective of, even if you want a quarterback, even if you don't, you want to get to the top 3. You want to secure a chance to draft one of those 3 guys, because you'll either turn it into a great haul in the trade market, or you'll find the future at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and I think that's really a good take. For the people that don't want to draft a quarterback, why do you want to be in the top 3 selections? Well, if there's another team that does want a quarterback, the Giants may be able to move back and get some substantial draft capital, because, it's not number 1, but it's the last top quarterback on the docket. And, a lot of people in my DMs this morning are yelling about Michael Penix, and he's not that mobile. He has a long injury history. He's going to be older. Not my favorite prospect. Now, I know some people would like to draft him, and, it's obviously he's also a lefty. And here's another reason why the Giants should not be going in the Michael Penix direction. If a lefty quarterback, the right tackle spot is their blind side. We don't have a right tackle. You paid Andrew Thomas to be your blind side protector. We don't have that on the right tackle position. So why does Michael Penix, if you want to throw the argument out there that we shouldn't be drafting a quarterback because of the offensive line, Michael Penix makes even more sense not to draft him because he's a lefty, and we don't have his blind side protected well. So, looking at what the kind of draft rankings look like right now, you have Chicago number 1 locked in, Washington 2, New England 3, Arizona 4, Giants 5. So right now, assuming that Justin Fields stays with the Bears, and there's reports coming out today even that veteran players on the Bears are like, we don't want Justin Fields traded. Like, he's a good locker room guy. We like him. They feel the same way about Roquan Smith. They traded into the Baltimore Ravens, and now they have an elite linebacker duo. You know, you look at kind of Washington, they're going quarterback for sure. New England, definitely going quarterback. Arizona, Kyler Murray's been looking pretty good. And you mentioned a suspect Seattle defense. The Eagles defense has been freaking suspect too, even more so. So you look at the Giants' chances of winning next week. Look, the truth is, I honestly think the Giants could beat the Eagles in Week 18, even if they start their main guys. And like you said, you know, I think if you're the Eagles right now, why do you start your starters? Well, I'll give you a really freaking good reason. They've been sucking lately. They need to put together a good game before playing in the playoffs. They can't go into the postseason with no momentum on a loss to Arizona. That is not a good way to enter the playoffs. You want to go in, beat up on the Giants, and then go to the playoffs and have some momentum and some good kind of feeling about what you're about to embark on in the elimination rounds. That's where you want to start, like beating up on the Giants. Now, the Giants have been playing a little bit better lately. You know, they've been staying in games, a little bit better time clock management. You know, Dable's had his moments, had 2 successful challenges this past weekend, obviously. Certainly a good thing. And the offense they've had moments, but a lot of mistakes. But a couple of really nice touchdowns. Tyrod Taylor, obviously, really nice throws downfields, but otherwise, some boneheaded mistakes. Whether it be throwing behind Saquon Barkley, some passes that were behind him, behind Jalen Hyatt, for example. There's a lot of blame to go around. Now, let's talk about kind of what happens here if New England and Arizona win. So New England's playing the Jets, and New England put up a good fight against the Buffalo Bills this past weekend. If New England scores 20 points, they have a good chance of beating the Jets, to be quite honest with you. And Zapp looked really bad. He threw a couple interceptions. Arizona, they could beat Seattle. They're, you know, obviously performing at a decent level the past couple of weeks. You know, had a couple of inconsistent games, but Arizona, for the most part, they can win any game that you put them against a kind of average team. And Seattle's, they're slightly above average, but they're beatable. The Giants in 5. So right now the Giants actually have a good spot. Like, even if they were to stay at 5, they'd have a chance at a quarterback, because assuming Chicago and Arizona stay put. But if New England and Arizona win, because of our strength of schedule, we end up taking that 3rd overall spot. A perfect scenario would be Washington, New England, and Arizona winning. Probably not going to happen, because Washington, I don't think they're going to beat Dallas. Dallas is going to probably run them out of the house. But, you know, what are your thoughts on the situation of this? Like, if New England and Arizona lose this game, the Giants end up with a top 3 pick. I guess, do you think right now you're like, okay, now you're locked into a quarterback, or alternatively, you're gonna, if you want your guy to trade up to 1st overall for Chicago, there's reports coming out that the Giants could have to give up 3 first-round picks and a good player. I would say that 2 first-round picks and a good player would make sense. I'll throw this mock trade. I'm not saying I like this, but would you do, I'll ask you this, so drop it in the comments, would you do 2 first-round picks and Kayvon Thibodeau, so the 2024 first-round pick, 2025, and Kayvon Thibodeau to move up to number 1 to acquire your quarterback of choice, whatever guy you want? Would you be willing to do that? Not saying I would. I'm just asking the question because that's kind of what it's going to take. You know, what are your thoughts about that? The fact that you have to give up a lot of capital. Are you okay giving up that much to move up to number 1 and have your chance at whatever quarterback you want that fits your scheme, that has that upside that you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm going to shock a lot of people here. I'm going to say yes. Like, I'm going to go bold here, absolutely, because of what it implies. If the Bears don't, let's say the Bears don't trade, or let's say the Bears trade that pick, right? And it's not to the New York Giants. And let's say, you know what, it's not even to the Washington Commanders. Let's say it is to, you know, let's just say it's the Patriots, right? The Patriots end up with, let's say, Caleb Williams. The Commanders end up with Drake May. So Drake May is considered, I mean, he's not considered as good as Caleb Williams, but he's about as close as you can get, right? That quarterback ends up in your own division. So in your own division, I know he's struggling this year. He hasn't had the best year in the world, but he still is a good quarterback. You have Jalen Hurts in your division. You have Dak Prescott, who's having a career year in your own division, and you have Drake May in your own division. And what are you stuck with? You're stuck with Daniel Jones, right? You're stuck with Daniel Jones in the quarterback room you've been stuck with basically for the last few years, right? You could argue, yes, they could take Jalen Daniels, but I don't know if that's great value at the 3rd pick. Again, if that's your guy, you have to take him, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say if they evaluate him as the 3rd best player in this draft, they shouldn't take him because what I think on this channel. But what I am saying is that I doubt that they have a 3rd pick evaluation on Jaden Daniels. It would go against the public consensus. It would go against kind of, league trends or whatever, most mocks have him at. If you can trade down even, that would be ideal. But then if you trade down, you put yourself in a position where you can't guarantee that he's going to end up on your team. So that's also a tricky situation. I think that if you want a quarterback, if you think that that player is going to change your franchise, the next 2 first-round picks you use will not be on a quarterback. So do those picks matter as much as getting a chance to draft the guy you think is going to be the franchise quarterback? And also for this front office, how many coaches, how many guys in the front office will stick around if the Giants aren't very good next year, or if they don't take any steps forward next year? I understand, that, we're looking at this from a fan perspective, and from a fan perspective, how can I sit here and say, root for the Eagles to beat the Giants? That's disgusting. It feels gross leaving my mouth, right? But you have to think of the long-term future of the team, and the long-term future of the team includes, hey, do you want more instability in your front office and your coaching staff? How does that look to prospective coaches and prospective front office personnel who want to take jobs with the Giants? They're going to say, well, you fired that guy after 3 years. You fired that guy after 2 years. I know coming back from a baseball background here, but, if you look at what happened with the Boston Red Sox over the offseason, they had an issue finding a GM for a good portion of it because they keep firing GMs. If you just fire a guy every 2 or 3 years, you're going to be putting them in, you're not going to be a great spot or an attractive destination to go to. You don't have a quarterback, and you would be without a quarterback. You would have a premier draft pick, but we don't know what next year's quarterback class, if it's going to be excellent or if it's going to be poor. I mean, PFF mocked Spencer Rattler to be a first-round pick a year ago. Quarterback, stock changes like this. We can't sit here and bank on a guy in next year's draft. The Giants right now need to look at themselves and say, we don't have a quarterback. We have not had a quarterback for a while. I don't care how much Daniel Jones getting paid. I don't care how good Tommy DeVito looks. Tyrod Taylor looks like a great backup, but that's what he is, a great backup, that these guys are not difference makers. These guys are not elevating you to that next level, and you don't win Super Bowls because you have a great offensive line and a bad quarterback. A good quarterback can hide a bad offensive line. A good quarterback can hide a not great receiving core. A great offensive line can't do the vice versa, right? You can have, 5 Hall of Famers. If you've got Daniel Jones in the pocket, you're probably not winning the Super Bowl. That's no disrespect to Daniel Jones. I don't think he would sit here and say, yep, I'm a Patrick Mahomes type quarterback. And I know how unrealistic that sounds, but if that's the evaluation the Giants have for Caleb Williams, this is a generational franchise changer. Your commitment needs to be there. I'm going to draw another parallel to Mahomes here, not because I think Williams is the next Mahomes, but the Chiefs traded draft capital to go get their guy, right? How many of these great quarterbacks, Josh Allen, the Bills traded up to go out and get him, right? When you have a quarterback, when you see a great quarterback talent, when you see a player worth making that investment for, it's always going to be worth it. Look, I think Kayvon Thibodeau has a chance to be a really good defensive player in this league. I think he's shown this year that he has, he's had games where he's changed the game on his own, where entire games were decided by Kayvon Thibodeau. But when it comes to the quarterback position, the value is just not comparable, right? Like a quarterback changed the game every single week. You can't say the same about a defensive player. And again, if Caleb Williams is good, those first-round picks aren't going to be premium first-round picks. And, Alex, I'm not sitting here and saying the Giants roster is great, but we've seen how they played with Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor. Are they going to have a premium draft pick next year? I'm not necessarily sure about that. I don't think it's impossible that on a last-place schedule, on a third-place schedule, they win, maybe 6 or 7 games. This year alone, they might end up winning 6 games, right? And that's with their starting quarterback going down and going to Tommy DeVito, going to Tyrod Taylor. I'm not convinced that this team is going to be terrible next year. So if I know that this team has a chance to be pretty okay next year, I'm going to go out and get a quarterback and say, I might be a Caleb Williams away from being a playoff team. You go 9-8 next year and you make a play and you grab a wild card spot with Caleb Williams, I'm telling you, it's going to be a different feeling in New York. The Giants are going to be box office. As a fan, you're going to be feeling differently. I'm going to be feeling differently. I think you got to go out and do it.
Yeah, that's really the kind of paramount conversations. Like even the Chiefs went in. I guess Alex Smith is having a good year the year before, and they still went and got Mahomes. You see kind of what the impact is. C.J. Stroud's the perfect example. Houston was dead in the water, guys. Like nobody thought they were anything. They had Jalen Mills, and then they step in and get C.J. Stroud, and now they're like perennial, like they feel like they're going to be perennial playoff contenders, and they have a really bad offensive line. 6 of their starters have hit IR. So you see, and like you said, the truth is they don't have like insane receivers. Nico Collins is a good receiver. Tank Dell, he's injured. Good receiver though, but like they're not number 1s. They're number 2s mostly, and they have Dalton Schultz. So it's like, they don't really have that much yet. CJ Stroud's elevated everybody on that team. And I think right now, we've talked about the quarterback position a lot, right? This is not something that we've been failing to cover. I mostly wanted to hit on what the possibilities were if Week 18 goes favorably for us. So if everything was to go perfect and the Giants were to walk away from the situation, I'm just talking about draft capital specifically. From a winning perspective, if you want to beat the Eagles in week 18 and not get a quarterback and you don't really care about that, that's totally up to you. I respect it. Beating the Eagles is always great. You never want to lose the Eagles, and they're failing right now. They're kind of flopping. Could be some big changes over there this upcoming offseason. But, the truth is, for the long-term success of the Giants, there are people out there that would prefer to see the Giants lose this game, so they have a better draft capital, they have a better chance of getting a quarterback, and have a better chance at prolonged success. I think both things can be right. Both things can be true. You can want to beat the Eagles, but you can also want long-term success that we beat the Eagles, 12 times in a row instead of losing to them every year twice and then some. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to have to go through this cycle every single year. And the truth is, like you said, if Daniel Jones comes back, he's a better quarterback than Tommy DeVito, and he's a better quarterback than Tyrod Taylor. Some may even argue that. So, coming back to Daniel Jones here, like you said, the Giants could be this stuck in this kind of age of mediocrity where they win like 9 games, maybe like make the playoffs, first round, second round, exit, and they just never get past that. Like it could be like that because the Giants are going to end up paying Daniel Jones $50 million in 2025 and $56 million in 2026. And for what? He's not worth it. Like, we know that at this point. But again, this is the worst case scenario for the Giants if things were to go very poorly. The worst case scenario would be the Giants winning, Arizona losing, and then New England losing and Washington losing. All those teams lose. We end up kind of picking in the 8 range, like 7-8 range, and we fall behind some teams here that could end up wanting a quarterback. I mean, I don't think that's the case. The Jets probably are not drafting a quarterback because of Aaron Rodgers. Tennessee got Will Levis, so or Will Levis. So they don't want him. Justin Fields, or rather Justin Herbert, with the Chargers. So but there are teams that can move up, like Atlanta is right there. Even Vegas is right there. Minnesota is right there. Denver. They could move up if they wanted to try to snag one of those guys. That would be a worst case scenario where the Giants kind of fall into a range here where like trading up to get your guy is going to cost a lot, like stupid amount. Like you probably can't even justify it at that point. So if you end up in the top 3, top 4 even, at least you have a shot. At least you have a chance to make that decision. And look, for the people like out there, like, we've talked about the quarterback position a lot. There's a world where the Giants say, we pay Daniel Jones. We like Daniel Jones. He's our guy. Let's move back. Or we go and get Malik Neighbors, or you get Marvin Harrison Jr. if he's there. And you just sit there and take the best freaking receiver in this draft class. And look, Neighbors was 1 yard short, I think, of setting the LSU franchise or like team record for yards in a single season. Like, guy was elite this season. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a Pro Bowler on day 1. Or you go Olu Fashanu and you get a tackle. I mean, like, yes, look, Joe Alt, Fashanu, both of them are left tackles. They'd have to transition to the right side. But look, people want to go in that direction. That's totally fair. Look, there's nothing wrong with wanting to continue investing in the offensive line because it's been so bad for so long. We haven't been able to get the proper elevation of our quarterback position because of that. But at this point in time, I'm scared that we can't develop offensive linemen. That's my fear. I'm scared we can't develop these guys. There's a world, for what it's worth, and Ryan, I'll get your take on this. There's a world where the Giants use Daniel Jones as a bridge quarterback this upcoming season. They take the top receiver or top offensive lineman in the draft, wherever they are, and they wait until like the second round and get a guy like J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. Maybe there's an opportunity for them to go after one of those types of players. J.J. McCarthy, who could develop, wait a year, they see the upside, they see the arm talent, they see the qualities, and they're like, yeah, like this, this guy could be something. Maybe that's something that people are attracted to. And honestly, that's not a terrible idea. If you end up with Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors and J.J. McCarthy to develop as Daniel Jones kind of rides out the rest of this contract into year 4, or rather into year 3, and you take the out and you have all this cash and you have a rookie quarterback who's making second round money, pennies on the dollar, maybe that's an option. What are your thoughts on that? The idea, like, maybe you take the developmental guy, let him sit for you. The qualities are there. You just got to work on them. And then you go after a top elite level receiver that now you have elite receiver on a rookie deal with a 5th year option. And those are hard to come by.
Yeah, I'll say this. This is one of those, quarterback classes where you can find your Jalen Hurts, your Dak Prescott. I mean, I don't really want to throw Derek Carr in that conversation because I feel like Hurts and Prescott are better quarterbacks than he's been in his career. But you get my point, right? Like, this is the draft where, if you were going to find a draft to find a second or third round guy, or just a non-first rounder who becomes a quality NFL quarterback, this is certainly one of them. You mentioned Penix, right? Like, if maybe his stock falls, but there are a lot of concerns about the injuries. I believe he tore his ACL twice, and then he had a shoulder injury. And you also mentioned, there are legitimate concerns there, but hey, this is a team that just needs some quarterback help. The issue is that they don't have a lot of upside in the quarterback room. That's where you're at right now, right? Look, I get it. Daniel Jones led us to a playoff victory, and look, that alone is pretty cool. I'm not going to take away from that fact. But the upside is limited, right? He was very limited in what he did in the offense last year, and there was a reason for that. And if you're getting a guy like Neighbors, you're getting a guy like Harrison, right? Let's be real here. Receivers want to put up numbers, right? This is a league. I'm not even saying that receivers are selfish, but you need to put up numbers so you can go out and get paid, because this is a league where you're one play away from your career ending, right? So you need to put up numbers. This isn't, a guaranteed salary league. This is the farthest thing from it. This is probably one of the least player-friendly professional leagues in all of North American sports, if not the least player-friendly one. So if you have a quarterback who's not getting the receiver the ball, they're not going to be happy. And if they're not happy, you've got problems. That creates distractions. You don't want that. That's bad for your locker room, right? And I'm not saying that to say that, it's good that receivers complain, but more so, are they wrong? If Marvin Harrison Jr. by, week 8 was dude, I don't get the football. What's going on here, right? My quarterback can't get the football to me. I'm pissed, right? Can you say he's wrong for saying it? Maybe he shouldn't. I hope he never goes public with that. I hope it doesn't become enough of an issue where that would create ripples in the locker room, but he wouldn't be wrong for feeling it. So you got to put your receivers in a good position to succeed. Jalen Hyatt is a guy that I think can really break out next year. He's one of the top graded receivers in football on deep throws. This is a guy who, look, he's not going to be a number one possession guy where he's going out and a perennial Pro Bowl guy, but he can be a pretty good deep threat for you that opens up your offense and creates space. You mentioned the Tyrod Taylor throw against the Rams. That throw to Slayton, we don't see that in this offense. Not even just because our receivers are incapable. Slayton has the speed. Hyatt has the speed for sure. Hyatt is a great athlete. Maybe those guys aren't the most consistent when it comes to bringing down throws, but they really get the opportunity. And that's because of how a lot of the quarterbacks in the system play. What made Tyrod Taylor look really good against the Rams was he was aggressive and he was willing to push the ball downfield. You mentioned there were a lot of boneheaded plays in that game. There were a lot of plays where it's Tyrod, what the hell are you doing? But overall, the stat line looked great. And if you watched the full game, you walked away from it feeling, you know what? He looked good. And that's because he was willing to push the ball downfield. When you're willing to take those big shots and you convert them, your offense looks great. You create efficient points. You put yourself in a position where you can come from behind, or you could bury a team. And look, I'm not saying Saquon's, the dominant running back he was coming out of the draft, but you can put yourself in a position where, I feel like this team could get to the point where they run the ball enough where if they have a lead, they can hold it. This defense is getting better. They're a young defense, understandably so. They've struggled at times, but I think they have a lot of talent there. You need upside in your quarterback room, whether that's finding a guy in the second round, third round, fourth round, finding a guy, as we mentioned earlier, trading up and finding your guy. But I think the emphasis walking away from the draft and the emphasis coming into week 18 is the Giants need to find upside in their quarterback room. And look, I'm not even saying the guy you draft in the second round starts on week 1. I don't think it has to be that way. Did Jalen Hurts start in week 1? No, he sat behind Carson Wentz for almost an entire season, right? Even Dak Prescott, right? He walked into, his career as the backup for Tony Romo, and he stepped in when Tony Romo got hurt, right? I do think that Daniel Jones is going to get an opportunity to start next year. They're paying him $40 million, and from his perspective too, he wants to play to rebuild his market value a little bit, perhaps get a one-year deal, whatever it may be. You see what Baker Mayfield's doing with the Bucs, right? You've seen what guys like Ryan Tannehill have been able to do in Tennessee in years past. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is as good as those guys, but still, maybe it's just a matter of, it's best for both parties for them to split ways. But end of the day, and I'm gonna end my point off with this: regardless of what you take in the first round, if you don't walk away from the draft class with upside the quarterback position, whatever that looks like, I would say it's kind of a failure, and it would just feel like you're going into next year in the same position the Giants have been for the last half decade plus.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, this is I just don't want to watch the Giants lose games anymore that we should win. I don't want to watch the Giants, disappoint us. Really, guys, I think we're in the same boat. We want Super Bowls, man. We want to feel that feeling. I remember I was a young kid. I was 10 years old when they won the first Super Bowl. And I remember falling out of my chair. I'll never forget the feeling because it was like one of those emotions that you unlock at that moment. That Plaxico, or rather the David Tyree catch or the Mario Manningham catch. Like, it's like a new emotion you unlock in that given moment. I want that back. You know what I mean? I will do whatever it takes to get that feeling back. And if it means trading for a quarterback, I think has elite upside that can bring us to the promised land, bring us to that level of quality, I'm willing to do it. If it means losing one game to the Eagles for 10 years of dynasty level performance or a possibility at it, sign me the hell up, man. Like, the president's always great. Like, you love to beat good teams. You love to beat rivals. But, like, I don't want to suck next year and forget that we even won that game because it doesn't matter in a lost season where we're out of the playoffs. Like, it's such like a mind screw for me. Like, you play that both, like, ethical dilemma in your head. And it's hard to kind of, like, figure it out. And, like, people are on both sides of the equation. And I respect all you guys. Like, at the end of the day, we're all Giants fans. We all want the same thing, is for Giants to beat everybody and win games, and big ones. We want to go in to Arrowhead Stadium against Pat Mahomes and know that we have a chance. We want to go into Buffalo. We want to go into Philly. We want to go into Arlington. Imagine going to Dallas and beating the freaking shit out of them. In Dallas, in front of Jerry Jones, and looking at that smirk on his face when he knows the Giants are back. I long for that moment. We have been sitting here for 5 years waiting for a glimpse at that moment. It's never come. They've been smiling at Jerry Jones on his damn yacht. Have been looking at us and looking down at us like we're little brothers. And we have a chance to turn that around. Like you said, how often is it that you have a top 5 pick? For the Giants, it's pretty frequent, but not in a class like this where you have quarterbacks that have this type of ceiling. At this point, like, you have to consider it at the very least. If you're against drafting a quarterback, I don't know why. I'm not against taking a receiver. I am against taking an offensive lineman. Why? Because we cannot develop them. If we go out and get a really great offensive line coach, the best one available, and then you draft an offensive lineman, I could sign up for that logic. I could sign up for that equation. I do not trust Bobby Johnson to develop Fashanu or Joe Alt into competent right tackles. I just don't. If you do, God bless you, because you watch this offensive line and they suck. They stink. So you tell me, what needs to happen first? For me, going out to get the best coach possible. But guys, love your perspectives below. Obviously, this could go a lot of ways. This upcoming week is going to define where the Giants sit in the draft and what they can do, their flexibility, their maneuverability, and really their upside here. So, the future really hangs on the balance. But again, like, you deal the cards that you're dealt. It is what it is. We figure it out from there. And one thing's for sure, I don't think Joe Schoen's scared of trading up. I don't think he's scared of anything. He'll give up what it takes. And like you said, I don't want to see the Giants churn through another coaching staff in 3 years again, 2 years again, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm tired of it. People aren't going to want to come here. Good coordinators are not going to want to come here, because the truth is, we can't keep jobs. You know what I mean? We need to show some sort of reason for optimism here. And I think the Giants do have a chance to do that. So guys, always happy to hear your perspective down below in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe as always. And we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.
TVSO.